One of the more controversial things in D&D is the concept of a DMPC, or the Dungeon Master having their own player character join the party. Some say that it's perfectly fine, the DM should feel included with the party and get to experience the game with them. Others say the DM already has a role and they should focus on that. Personally, I think it's a risky move. It can be fine, but a Dungeon Master controlling a true player character would be out of place in most campaigns. This is one such case of a DMPC going bad and backstabbing the party. Just before we roll post on this, if you like maps, you're going to love today's sponsor. Viewer, this is Chipeku, your new map dealer. Next time you're scouting for fantasy maps to use in your next Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder campaign, Chipeku has you covered. With 4,000 stunning, hand-drawn fantasy maps and D&D battle maps, Chipeku listens to what you have to say. If you can't find what you want, just let them know and they might add it to their weekly Patreon poll. Map packs come with variations for things like seasons, time of day, weather effects, and much more. So if your players spend hours in, say, a tavern planning their next move, you can seamlessly switch the environment just like that. Chipeku fantasy maps and D&D battle maps work seamlessly on most virtual tabletops. So, follow the link to Chipeku's Patreon. Back to the story. My DM's character wiped out the entire party. He also denies that his DMPC is overpowered. Is he right? Our DM, who we will call Halo, kept trying to put hard moral choices in the campaign. Choices that had no right answer. There was one incident where we had to choose between letting a village die or advancing our goals. There was another time when the only way we could get an important item was by killing an innocent man. There were more such cases, but every time we were faced with a hard moral choice, it was actually easy for us. We simply moved towards our goals without regard for the nameless NPCs that would get hurt. Looking back on it, Halo was probably annoyed that we would never really consider the morality of our choices and instead always make the selfish choice. But we didn't care. And no matter what we did, I feel our characters were justified by the fact that we were stopping an evil tyrant from taking over. I think it would actually be cool to see what happens when a party completely disregards the world around them to save it. It would be an interesting story. Just deeply flawed heroes who are on the right side for the wrong reasons. Also, the consequences of disregarding the people in the world that they're saving could come around to bite them. Also, I think it would just open up an interesting discussion about the ends justifying the means. But this campaign, unfortunately, doesn't make it work. Later in the campaign, there was yet another morally gray decision to make. We needed to go into the villain's hideout immediately to catch him. But if we did that, we would leave our city exposed to an invading army. The city's defenses are unlikely to hold off the invaders on their own, so they need our help. This was the only one that gave us pause. Not really because of the ethical concerns of leaving them undefended, rather, we were worried about our favorite NPCs dying, losing our hard-earned stuff, and our home base. We were unconcerned about the people in the city, debating over whether the trade-off is worth it from a merely mechanical point of view. We decided to defend the town and let the villain gain some ground. The battle begins, but just after the first couple rounds of combat, a beam flashed across the sky, crashing into enemy lines. He clawed through the enemy army effortlessly, with all sorts of flashing lights and spells booming across the battlefield. We complete our few rounds of combat, but after the combat is over, we investigate the scene. We see a golden knight with a blue cape. I forget his name, so we will just call him Superman. Superman gets up and greets the party. "Hello, you must be the party I've been sent to. The gods have been watching you, and your neglect for this world. When you finally made the right choice, That's when they knew that there was good in you, and I was sent to draw it out of you. This just neuters character choice and is also condescending. The whole point of games having tough moral choices is that the characters have to make choices that sometimes have no right answer, and then they have to live with the consequences. If I was designing a morally gray choice-based game where the true villain was irredeemably evil, and the players chose to become the lesser of two evils in order to stop the real bad guy, I actually think it makes perfect sense for a good faction to try and stop them. I would make this good faction well-intentioned, but the party sees them as soft, naive, or otherwise incapable of taking out the real villains. Now, our once noble party has to kill morally righteous people to get them out of the way so they can focus on the real villain. That turning point would be felt. Anyways, where were we? Superman was a strange cleric/barbarian multi-class with a homebrew race and background. Anyways, this is where the real Hoarder's story begins. We had no reason yet to doubt Halo. Even as he appeared to be visibly annoyed at our choices sometimes, the game was good. But Superman was annoying to the max. Whenever we had downtime, he would take up all of the space by monologuing about morality, the inherent value of all humankind, and our duty to be better than the enemy. We only had to deal with him in the first place as a punishment for doing a good deed. So I figured that if we just did enough bad deeds, we would be rid of him. An opportunity presented itself soon enough. Because we chose to defend the city, the main villain got away. During that time, we did capture one of his men, and he had information. He wouldn't break, cursing and spitting at us. We weren't glad to be doing this, but it looked like if we were going to get the information, we would need to torture it out of him. No, that isn't right. Look at yourselves. You are better than this, Superman told us. Do you have any better ideas? We have to find our mark. There's gotta be a better way. There is never a good reason to torture. That's barbaric. Barbaric times call for barbaric measures. We don't make the rules. But the gods, you can't let them down. Hey buddy, F you and your gods. We don't care. We then tortured the NPC for information. He gave it up after a little persuasion. Superman scowled at us and said that there will be consequences for our actions. We told him that, yeah, the consequence for our actions was getting valuable information. Halo was pissed. He didn't show it, but we knew. In a way, I do feel bad for the DM. The story isn't over yet, so I won't jump and say that he's the real victim here. But so far, it just looks like Halo is incompatible with the party due to different expectations, not necessarily one or the other being totally bad. I understand being a DM and wanting to play with a heroic party, but watching them fall short. Unfortunately, the party will not be the good guys if they do not want to be the good guys. However, I have a feeling Halo will ruin this before long. We kept going for a couple sessions. Halo kept trying to make us do good deeds. Whenever we didn't do one, he would tell us about how our bad decisions will bite us in the end. Later, we were passing through a village. On our way through, a villager told us that they were all impoverished and asked us to help solve their bandit problem. Before we could do anything, Superman enlisted our help to save the village, saying that we would be monsters if we didn't do it. And we were already on thin ice with the gods already, so we may as well. We were aggravated by Superman constantly showing off how strong he is, then lecturing us about how awful we are. When games were done, us players would privately complain to each other about how much we despised him. The problem is the party doesn't want to do good, they want to do the objectives. They like the main content because it doesn't place expectations on who they are as a person. The only thing they actually need is to be willing to fight the big bad. The problem with the side content is, the side content needs the players to want to act against their own interests to help others. The weirdest thing about this story that I just can't explain is that the DM actually got the party to choose the right thing before when they defended the city. If the DM was smart, he would have learned why they wanted to defend the city and use that information to get the party to want to help other people. But no, let's see how this ends. After helping the villagers, we went back to tracking down the big bad, and surprise, surprise, because we helped the villagers, the big bad escaped our grasp once again. That night at the party's camp, Superman left to hunt for food, and while he was gone, my friend Jace said that if we ever have to work for Superman again, she would kill him. Some of us were more reluctant than others, but we all agreed. Halo, of course, heard us all say this, but we didn't think he would favor Superman over us. After that night, Superman stopped forcing us to help people. He would still lecture us, but he wouldn't make us do anything. A few sessions passed and Halo made his last move. We had overtaken an enemy fort. In it, we found a massive font of power. If we used it, we would all get a level up, but Superman told us that if we give the power to him, he would be able to divide it and give it sentience, creating an army of supermen. We could not allow this, so we told him no, he would not be doing that. We then began to absorb the power for ourselves. Superman warned us that without his army, we would never defeat the big bad. We didn't care. Superman warned us one more time that he would do what he had to get that font of power. We drew our weapons and got in formation. Superman hit us with an AoE attack and combat began. There wasn't much to the fight. His AC was too high for us to hit him often, so we frequently missed. Even if we did hit, he had a mountain of hit points. Also, his attacks were highly effective. It was a long fight, but in the end he defeated us. And he also took the font of power. I didn't know how to respond at the time. None of us did. Next time we met, the topic of the D&D game was brought up. I had mentioned that Superman only won because he was overpowered. He's not overpowered, he's just well designed, Halo responded. So I ask you crabs, is he overpowered? This is a case that happens all too often, where the DM has a different vision for the game than the players do. While the DM acted badly throughout, if the party agreed to a campaign where they were expected to behave honorably, then yes, the party would be in the wrong. But it wasn't mentioned that there was any communication on that point. So I'm just going to assume that there was no discussion or expectation that the party should be selfless heroes. In any case, dangling a level up in front of the players' faces and then taking it away is just evil, man. As much as that story stung, this is a story where the players get god-tier revenge on the DMPC. Roll post. This was still very early into my D&D career. We were playing 3.5 and our previous campaign ended for a reason I simply cannot remember. One of the players wanted to run a campaign that practically removed any power limiters one might have on character creation. Any homebrew anything was open as long as you ran it by the DM. The only limit to our power was a time manipulation magic user that could basically disrupt reality within the first 3 to 4 levels. That one was turned down, so there were limits. There were 5 players, myself, 2 friends, James and Ignatius, both of whom I met in my freshman dorm, the DM and his girlfriend, who James knew from work. As this was basically an unlimited campaign, we were all playing homebrew classes. I myself was playing an adventurer dragon race class combo thing I found, as I was, and still am, massively obsessed with dragons in any capacity. Ignatius was playing a samurai, and the DM was playing some sort of vampire. Yes, the DM also made a character. Even before I knew the Hoarder's stories of DMPCs, this kind of confused me, but he insisted that it was not going to be a problem. Okay, DMPCs are a difficult thing to talk about. DMPCs get a bad name in part because of videos like this. If I had to give advice to 90% of DMs, don't do it. You're not going to make the game better by doing it. But a DMPC being in your game should not be considered a reason to leave before it even starts. In my mind, a DMPC being in the game can be a reasonable cause for suspicion, but that's all it is. Suspicion, nothing more. So if you have had a bad experience with a DMPC, please don't kick yourself or think it's your fault because you didn't read the signs, because just the DMPC existing is not an issue. And for a while, it was not a problem, or at least I didn't notice it at first anyway. The main problem came from the fact that that balance was never even considered. I don't know if this was intentional, or if the DM just lacked the skill needed to properly plan out the progression of the campaign. The result was just insane XP gains that had us jumping over 1 or 2 levels per encounter. There were so many levels and XP being gained that everyone grabbed multiclassing just to have somewhere to put levels. Being a new player, I didn't understand what such unchecked progression meant, since there was no buildup of character power. This is a common mistake that otherwise good DMs can make sometimes. They want their players to feel powerful, so they just snap their fingers and make them powerful, like a genie. But it's important to make the growth in power feel earned. It feels cheap when they're just handed everything. The solution is simple and pretty obvious. When characters progress, make sure that there's a reason for it. D&D proper can make that a little difficult, given that a level up just makes you instantly more powerful at the snap of your fingers, but players don't usually complain about that. The great DMs realize that there is more to progression than just slapping a level up on your character. Just for one example, players love it when they have a cool story that explains each of their magic items. But you can apply that same principle to the party's reputation or influence in the world. Anyways, where were we? The first actual problem came when a massive Darkfire Phoenix attacked the city that we were in. We were already rapidly leveling before this, so we take out this gargantuan Darkfire bird in almost a single round, maybe 2. This is when the DM informed us that when the Phoenix dies, it explodes in a mile-wide nuclear-styled Darkfire explosion. Side note here, in an attempt to rein in the unchecked progression, this Darkfire obliterated the soul of whomever it killed, as otherwise the souls of the PCs could easily reincarnate. So there we were, fighting this Darkfire bird, and we were about to get incinerated. We start looking for a way out, and somehow the portable hole spell was massively misunderstood, and the DM allowed us to get sucked up into the pocket dimension as a reaction. So instead of a post-mortem TPK, we all survive. Yay. Only to learn that the bird revives after like 5 minutes. A plan begins to form. We figure out how many times we can abuse the portable hole, and since this section of the city is already gone, we literally farm this creature for as many times as we can escape from the death blast. I don't recall how we dealt with it in the end, but we farmed over 10 levels from all the XP of repeatedly killing this massive creature. This is something I don't understand. D&D has so many advantages over video games, so why intentionally give yourself video game problems? At this point, why doesn't the party put a basket on the shopkeeper's head and then rob him blind? But what I like about this part of the story is that it ties all the way back to the beginning, when we talked about character progression. It's unsatisfying to farm 10 levels off of one creature. It's also unsustainable. Imagine getting all immersed in your character, excited to play a good long campaign, and then you zoot through half of the levels in one fight. My only question is, what was going through the DM's head at this time? He surely has to redraw a ton of his campaign plans after this. Did he panic? And why didn't he retcon this immediately after? This DM perplexes me. I'm now aware that there are many things about that setup that would not work, from the spell to the creature, etc. I think the only reason the DM allowed it was so that his own DMPC would benefit from it as well. More on that in a moment. Another system he introduced to deal with inflated XP gains was the ability to split your PC's soul into a second being. And I had the idea of creating a dragon-mounted archer duo. So I took this option and created a ranger. The DM immediately challenged me the first time, that I had them go out flying or get equipment to allow the archer to ride the dragon. You need to roll persuasion to allow the archer to ride the dragon. And I asked why. He tried to say that the noble dragon wouldn't allow a lesser race to ride him. But the argument just made no sense to me. They both shared the same soul. Why wouldn't the dragon allow it? Especially when I, the player of both of them, am not only okay with it, but actively intending it. The questioning of my characters was not really a horror story, but it was a symptom of the real issue. Even before the Darkfire Bird, the DM was getting unbearably annoying every time we leveled up. Everyone's excited about new classes or abilities, sharing them with the group. Each time, the DM would proudly, and unprompted, boast that it would not be able to kill his DMPC. In fact, his DMPC could still kill anyone in the party. It didn't really bother me, as I wasn't looking for PvP. Well, it didn't bother me the first few times, but after a half dozen instances of this, it got really old, and I recall the group telling the DM as such. We thought we actually got through to him, as during the next session, his Vampire Edgelord DMPC falls through a portal to hell, effectively removing him from the campaign. This was great. No more concern on if the DM was going to stab us in the back with the character he was favoring. Oh, how wrong we were. A number of sessions later, the vampire returns. The vampire returns after a massive story about how time moves differently in hell, and the vampire has spent the last 200 years drinking the blood of powerful demons. And he was now decked out in regenerating bone armor, stupid high armor class, and more magic powers than you could shake a stick at. Pretty sure he was also now a demon lord? He gained like 20 levels doing so. It seems in every story of a DMPC, there's a part where they come close to shaking him, but he just bounces back. Maybe it's the DM trying to get the party to save him, or maybe he's trying to see how the party would fare on their own, or maybe the DM heard the phrase "absence makes the heart grow fonder" and tried being absent. Then again, I wouldn't chalk this DM up as the most socially aware. Regardless, this part of the story is hilarious. The DM is telling on himself, exposing the fact that the game was never about the players. It was a fanfic for his overpowered vampire OC. Believe it or not, it gets worse. The DM was more than thrilled to tell the party all about the amazing, powerful abilities he had for his character. This allowed me to plan for countering his abilities. I do want to take a moment to state that this was not just about taking out the DMPC for being annoying. It was more the DM was subtle about his plans for his character to attack the party as running into a brick wall. He was just waiting for the chance to attack the party. So, one of the other players, Ignatius, took the Mage Slayer class. The most notable ability is that if a foe teleports, blinks, warps, or magically moves, the Mage Slayer is allowed to move with them. The only notable thing is that the character had like 60 feet of blind sense. Did I mention before that this campaign was stupidly unbalanced? With the counter prepared, the player waited for the DMPC to make the first move. And move he did. Raise the curtain on the finale. We were in a generic dungeon. A good hour or two into the session, the party got split up into a few chambers. James was alone with the DMPC and almost down, but still alive. This is when the DMPC vampire attacks James' character to suck his blood, saying that he was useless and I needed his blood, or whatever defense. James falls unconscious and the dominoes start to fall. In character, we call out this attack against the party. He tried to claim that no one else would know. Ignatius was within range of his blind sense to know what happened, and states as such. The DM immediately argues with him in character, trying to defend his actions. Ignatius, both in-game and out, is just done. We all were at this point, I think. I only stuck around to watch this final clash. The samurai rushes the vampire and raises his sword to strike. The DMPC blinks away, the DM fuming. And that's when Ignatius uses the Mage Slayer ability. The DM, of course, immediately calls foul, and then Ignatius shows him the character sheet with the ability. From a class the DM approved, but never actually read. If he had taken the time to review the sheets, he would have known about the ability and the player's intent to counter the DMPC and show that yes, we can attack and defeat the DMPC. The DMPC tries blinking into many different rooms, seemingly without limit. The Mage Slayer ability is also without limit. Eventually, the DMPC gives up trying to escape and turns to fight. This story keeps getting funnier by the second. First, the DM is just lazy. I assume that he was so self-assured that he thought he would be able to win no matter what. So there was no point in reading the other player's abilities. Because hey, I'm the DM, I always win. Right? That's what happens. I find it hilarious that the DM literally has all the power in the D&D world, but is rendered powerless by his own incompetence and one player, the DM Slayer. He reminds me of Kratos. He's not a victim of the DM or the game, the DM is a victim of him. Regardless, we'll see what happens when the DM's unlimited power clashes against his own incompetence. Our samurai has an obscene number of multi-attacks and overpowers the vampire's bone regen nonsense until the DMPC is finally dead. To the DM's credit, he didn't try to smite the players, he only used what was on his sheet, as completely overpowered as it was, and didn't try to revive the DMPC afterwards. But he did rage quit the campaign and declare that it was over. Oddly, when making his overpowered and bad character, he accidentally included one of the most important things to a good character, a weakness. Nobody really likes a character that has every power and ability, but no weaknesses or handicaps. For most people, this is not an issue. I'm talking more about the Mary Sues or min-maxers. In short, if you're going to make Superman, also make Kryptonite. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Till next time.